I found this note nailed onto a tree on my front lawn. I really don't know how to describe it. I'll just let you read it yourself. The note starts with, "I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me. You hardly ever do these days. Your skin looks so nice and healthy, and your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen them. You've grown so much. I remember how different you used to look when you were younger. I remember the day that I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting at my desk, head down, listening to the teacher rattling off names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognize, and a stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student? The teacher didn't pause for a second, just continued calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice had come from. I saw you, a pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at a seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies flying around you, flickering, dozens of them never straying far from you. I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin, like you were a mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost?" No one else seemed to acknowledge the new stranger sitting at the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour passed as I waited for something to happen. For someone to notice you, for you to leave, for you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like in the horror story I was certain I was in. But nothing happened. Teachers came and went. My classmates laughed and slept, and you just sat there. The bell rang for recess. The other kids ran to their daily tasks for the day, leaving me and you together in the empty classroom. You stood up and pulled a chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. "Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your questions." I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. Probably would have turned out better for me in the long run, but let's not speculate. I guess at that point in my life, I was pretty bloody lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd eat me, and the other 50 was that someone wanted to talk to me. Kid, priorities don't make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk, sat down on the chair you pulled out for me, and asked my question. What were you? You told me you didn't know. You said that once you were a child just like me, with parents and friends. You used to go to the same schools as me. Then, one day, one ordinary day, when you were 10, you just woke up and you were like this, covered in fireflies, and no one could remember you the moment they concentrated on anything else. No one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd noticed you every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years, about how I'd forgot the instant I walked out of the room, how everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you'd been alone. Your story was very hard to believe, so I didn't. I asked what reality prank show I was on. You looked, well, unimpressed and asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard. You said last time I was here I was telling you a story, a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps prickled my skin. It was a story I'd been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone yet. At that moment, a million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you. So I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask if my mother had recovered from her sickness yet. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed at the fact that I shared this private matter to a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go. Your steadiness took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate, like you'd already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid, and I was probably on the onset of a crush, so you can excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors, pressed it against my arm's skin, and dug in. As it drew blood, I pushed it forwards till the cut formed the shape that I wanted. Letter by letter, I carved your name onto my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong, kid power might have made me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But even then, as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that. The confusion. How strange it was for you that anyone would want to remember. I remember that look so clearly. When I woke up the next day and saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said no one had ever done anything like that before and suggested I might have a mental illness. I won't deny it, that drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came into my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember? That night, I was sitting up on my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should cover it up so I couldn't see it and give you back your privacy, when I heard a crash. I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered and a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out of the cracked window to see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice made you quite a bit rusty. That was alright. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You'd tell me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed the food that had gone missing, never noticed the extra room, or that you had stolen the extra keys. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think you were part of my imagination, Fight Club style. After all, what could you do to me that I couldn't do to myself? You spent the next month or so trying to leave bite marks on my ear or neck to prove a point. I still have a few scars on my ears, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get worse and worse, paler and paler, and you'd rubbed your eyes raw. It was in winter when we had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and started searching for clothes to wear. It was a winter morning, and my room was dark, so I didn't see your name on my arm. The cold sent shivers through my body, and I pulled out a long-sleeve jacket. A small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah, and why did I? That was annoying. I finished tidying up and headed to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I'd been worried about had just disappeared. I walked up the school stairs, down the hall, through my classroom door, and sat down at my desk. The same feeling of a burden forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I just sat at my desk while my classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out to join them when I heard it. It was something small in the wind, like a whisper, but it came over and over, incessant. It sounded like my name. I knew this was strange, but this was worth my attention. But I felt oddly calm. Everything would be alright. Everything would be fine. Just ignore it. I sat there at my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices, when I felt a force tugging on my sleeve. The moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open. I saw your name on my arm, and then your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You'd been yelling at me for over 20 minutes. I think that was the moment we realized how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from complete erasure. We spent most of the next year in the town library together, trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me. Because of my mother's treatment, my family couldn't afford to go on any trips, and our house didn't have heating anymore, so I was happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in of itself. After all, how would I read about people I couldn't remember? And how would you find out who was special when no one could even remember enough about them to record them? We found our old family trees and records. Individually, we'd write down the name of everyone in the book on 2 lists. Then we would compare. The names I hadn't remembered to write down, but you had, would become the focus. They were the names who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books, books we thought we could help, books we thought could help us, because they were written by, or were about, the people we were searching for. I read the books with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You scoured the internet on the library computers, on the lookout for articles about the people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse we got of what was really happening to you. It was late at night when we found the picture. I was a bit drowsy at that time, and almost about to nod off when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up, pointing at the screen. I didn't see anything. Well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you'd marked out 2 names. Susie Appleby Reagan, 13. Terry Appleby Reagan, 12. Siblings. For a moment I saw the paper and the screen side by side, and then I saw them. 2 figures emerging from the woods, towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, with the exception of their limbs, which stretched to nightmarish proportions. Their blank, white skin was that of a pure albino. It looked more like tree bark than anything you expected to find on a mammal. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. The shorter one looked emaciated. I could see their rib cages, around which their eyes, God, their eyes, so small and so red. The taller one, with its white hair, didn't look alive anymore. They were little more than skin wrapped around a skeleton. Fireflies swarmed out the pair's empty eye sockets. Both reached out for the cameraman. I looked at the article surrounding the picture. It was a blog posted by a hiker 20 years after the last mention of the 2 kids. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He'd been wanting to go to the woods pictured for a while now, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture had just appeared on his camera one day out of the blue. For a moment I looked at your face, your thin, pale face with those red veined eyes. Would that be you when my scar faded? Just a walking terror I'd glimpse then forget? We worked through our reading list at a much faster pace starting from that moment. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we'd left untouched, promised hope. The books that we finished and tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods as one's future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list before I stumbled across the journal. Oh God, that horrible, horrible journal. The journal used to belong to a mental patient named Joey, who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until his flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre and disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favorites were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. But a thing like this belongs to the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. In the end, it's sufficient to know that these things were not fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, anyone he pleased. He could take them at any time, in the dead of the night from their own homes, or in broad daylight from their front yards. It didn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house and drag them inside. Usually an Amber Alert came up at this point. He didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon. He'd drag them to a special room in his house. Here the fireflies would come and latch onto them. Now nobody was searching for the kids. Not the police, not the parents, nobody. From then on, he could do whatever he wanted to the kid. He'd get bored of them after a day or two, after the child had broken. At that point, he disposed of them. Hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with bugs. One day I guess he got bored of that too, so he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not on account of guilt. No. He just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing kids. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host, just in a dormant state. When a child would approach a swarm, it would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into the things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say the world owed him nothing, but that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out. On the final page, there was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face because, at that moment, you asked if I had found anything. I said no and closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down the computer, you picked up the last book and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was all right. I could go home. We'd talk about it in the morning. I stood up and walked past the shelves of books. I headed for the library entrance, but stopped right outside the door and waited. I waited until I heard the sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table, where you were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands. I sat back down as you raised your eyes to me. You said you wish you never met me, how happy you were when you had nothing to lose, how I ruined your life. You never really gotten better at talking to people. That was the worst love confession I'd ever heard. I remembered how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember that kiss. I wish it could have just been a kiss. I'm sorry I ruined that moment. When my arms were around you, I was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the firefly in my hand. I remember how it struggled until it didn't. Until it was a part of me. The firefly shifted. They came over to me and left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes. The confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserved to be loved, and you deserved to know that. I wasn't really living anyway. You reached for me. I pulled away as the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes. And then you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now. So many people at your birthday party. You also look so much healthier. I haven't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten a lot paler, and my eyes hurt all the time now. I couldn't go to school like you did all those years. I haven't wasted my time though. I found Joey's pit. The bodies. There were so many bodies. There's a grave for those children now. Without me, my mom could afford her surgery. She looks so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you crying yesterday. You were with your friends laughing. For a brief moment, your eyes met mine, and then they were so wet. I think I'm going away. For good, I think. You're not going to be happy if I stick around. I'm so happy I met you, even if you don't remember me. The note ends there. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes. I feel so lonely even with my friends. I don't know what's going through my head during these times. And sometimes I'd end up in a bathtub, a knife in my hands and my wrists bleeding. Until now, I thought I was cutting my wrists. I wasn't. The cuts, they're letters. I've been carving a name onto my arm. Growing up, early since the mid-2000s, my house always had an elf on the shelf during the Christmas season. If you don't know, elves on the shelf are these little elf dolls that are supposed to be scouts for Santa Claus. I named mine Humble. I think I was trying to name him Humboldt, but the words got confused, though I've long forgotten why I wanted to name him Humboldt in the first place. Anyway, starting every Thanksgiving, my parents would stick Humble somewhere he would practice his domestic espionage, and at night he would head back to the North Pole to snitch on me to Santa. He always flew back before dawn, always hiding someplace new, and each morning was like a miniature Easter egg hunt to find him. Of course, it was my parents who moved the damn thing every night. I guess I have some mixed feelings about the tradition. On the one hand, it was fun and magical, but on the other, it's also a pretty aggressive expansion on the practice of using Santa to keep your kids in line. I've also heard people say it's normalizing the government and corporate surveillance, but in the age of Alexa and Google, that's a bit of a moot point. But I think the weirdest thing about the elf on the shelf is how I was never allowed to touch the doll. I could talk to him, tell him what I wanted Santa to bring me for Christmas and all that, but touching him might drain him of his magic and keep him from returning to the North Pole where he belonged. Here's the actual line from the storybook that comes with the doll. There's only one rule that you must follow, so I will come back and be here tomorrow. Please do not touch me, my magic might go, and Santa won't hear all I've seen or I know. Obviously, the taboo against touching the doll makes it harder for a kid to conceive that it's actually their parents moving it around, or worse, testing that hypothesis, which to me really feels exceptionally manipulative. That might be because I never actually touched Humble, even years after I stopped believing in Santa. I have 2 younger siblings, so I guess I could just rationalize it as not touching him for their sake, but part of me just could not overcome the taboo about not touching the doll that my mother had instilled in me. I'm 18 now and in college, living in an off-campus apartment. I went home for Thanksgiving, of course, and sure enough, Humble was there on the mantelpiece. My sister Jenna loves the little creeper full-heartedly, believing he's magic and works for Santa Claus. I felt a little guilty, her buying the story hook, line, and sinker, but decided it was none of my business. When I got up Sunday morning, the day I was supposed to head back to my apartment, my mother asked me as covertly as she could if I knew where Humble was. He was missing, and no one in my house seemed to know where he went, or would be likely to play such a cruel trick on our youngest member. When he couldn't be found, my mom took Jenna aside and tried to explain that Humble must have been storm-stayed at Santa's workshop. To everyone's surprise, Jenna was delighted at the news. She said that she told Humble that she worried about me living away from home, and asked if he could spend some time at my apartment to make sure I was safe, and that's where he must be. My mother eagerly went along with this since it gave her time to find a replacement doll, and told me to call as soon as I got to my apartment to confirm that Humble was safe and sound. Wink wink. I promised to call the second I got back, and after saying my farewells, I embarked on the hour-long drive back to my apartment. I managed to get back before dark, which of course comes obscenely early this time of year, and as I awkwardly tried to make my way through the door with all my travel bags at once, I caught a glimpse of something bright red standing out against the off-white of my kitchenette. It was Humble, sitting atop my Keurig with his legs crossed and his hands in his lap. I knew it was Humble because my mother had put a bell from a Lindt chocolate bunny around his waist like a belt and stuck a miniature candy cane in it. The normally upsetting situation of someone breaking into my apartment was tempered by the fact that it had obviously been a member of my family. But who and why? Instead of calling them like I promised, I took a picture and texted it to my mom with the message, "Did you do this?" Moments later, the following conversation ensued. "Sweetie, why would you steal Humble? You know how much your sister loves him." "Mom, I swear I didn't steal him. I just found him here when I got home. If you didn't do this, check to make sure you still have my spare key because I know I locked up before I left." "Kay, I just checked. It's right where it should be." "I asked your father and he doesn't know anything either. He's looking over the security camera footage to make sure we weren't broken into." "Sweetie, I swear I didn't do this. Maybe you should come back home or stay in a hotel until we figure this out." At this point, I've searched my entire apartment for any sign of forced entry, a hidden intruder, something missing or damaged, and found absolutely nothing. The only thing out of place is Humble, and it makes no goddamn sense. The most likely explanation was that someone in my family was messing with me, but I couldn't think of anyone who would do this to me and Jenna, let alone have been able to have stolen Humble, drive to my apartment, place it, and then drive back undetected. The only other rational explanation was that I had a very stealthy, very skilled stalker who'd chosen an oddly specific way to mess with me. Of course, there was an obvious, irrational explanation for where Humble came from, but I shut down that line of thought immediately. It's just a damn doll. I really didn't want to drive anymore, and decided I couldn't miss class the next day or waste money on a hotel. So I asked my boyfriend to spend the night, who was more than happy to oblige. That still left the issue of what to do with Humble. Obviously, I should just mail him back home, but that would have required that I move him. That had to be why they did it. They knew I was still afraid to touch Humble, and they were teasing me. That had to be it. However, they did it. That had to be it. This was good, though, I thought. My unwillingness to touch Humble was childish, and I was all grown up now. I needed to move past it. The doll was sitting right there on my coffee machine. All I had to do was grab him, put him in a box, and ship him out. My little sister gets her doll back, and I become just a little bit more mature. There was no rational reason not to do it. I honestly can't tell you how long I just stood there staring at Humble, trying to muster up the courage to pick him up. It was ridiculous, but I just couldn't do it. My mother had ingrained that taboo into me too damn well, and touching Humble would be like crushing a fairy. "Hey, Humble," I started mumbling. "I know my sister asked you to keep an eye on me, and I know you're just trying to make her happy, but you're supposed to be watching her to report back to Santa, remember? I know you used to watch me, but I'm grown up now. I don't even get presents from Santa anymore. You don't need to watch me, and I'd hate for your report on Jenna to be inaccurate because you're here and not there. So please, after you report back to the North Pole tonight, go back to Jenna and let her know that I'm doing okay." I opened the cupboard and pulled out a pack of blueberry turnovers, placing one beside Humble. "That's for Santa. I know it's probably not his favorite kind of cookie, but it's all that I have right now. Merry Christmas, Humble." I don't know why I said those things. I don't know why I gave him the cookie. I didn't actually believe he was one of Santa's elves. At least, I don't think I did. My boyfriend Sean arrived shortly after that. If he noticed Humble, he didn't mention it. He's a pretty typical college-age guy, and so was eager to get to our bedroom activities. and I was eager for anything to get my mind off of Humble, so we got straight to it. I decided that if I still couldn't find the will to box up Humble in the morning, I'd just ask Sean to do it for me. I woke up the next morning in a considerably better mood. Sean was still sound asleep beside me, per usual, and then I remembered Humble and that I would have to move him to make my coffee. I thought about waking Sean up for it, but told myself I was being ridiculous and to just do it myself. But when I opened my bedroom door and looked into my kitchenette, Humble was gone, and so was the cookie. My first thought was that Sean must have moved him at some point, but the only time he ever got out of bed was to use the washroom, which was adjacent to the bedroom and didn't attach to the living area. He had proven himself time and time again to be completely incapable of getting out of bed without waking me up, so there was no way he went out there while I was sleeping. Even if he had, he never would have cleaned up the cookie. He might have eaten it, but then would have gone for more and left the package out. I know I'm not making him sound great here, but he's mostly a drinking bang buddy, and I'm not planning on us being a long-term thing. I immediately started searching for Humble, trying to find where in my tiny apartment he possibly could have gone, when I heard a notification from my phone, specifically the one I had set for text from my sister. A sudden dread swept over me. A fear of something that should have been impossible, somehow becoming the only conceivable explanation. I picked up my phone, swiped it open, and clicked on a message. I saw a photo of Humble sitting on my sister's bed with the accompanying text. "Humble's back. He wants me to tell you that Santa says thank you for the blueberry cookie. Chocolate chip's his favorite, but it was still yummy." I was in shock after that. I didn't know what to think. How could someone have stolen the doll, brought it here, snuck it out again, and then brought it home without leaving any sort of evidence? And why? I got another text from my mother later, who seemed content to write the whole thing off as me and my sister playing a trick on her as payback for everything she ever made us believe about the doll. I insisted we weren't, but soon gave up. I couldn't blame my mom for thinking that. It's what I would have thought if I was in her position. I wish I had been in her position, instead of trying to figure out if I was being stalked, haunted by a possessed doll, or just going insane. I was able to rule out the first option fairly quickly. I set up my phone to record the living room during the night. Nobody came in the front door, and there wasn't the slightest sound of anyone coming in through any windows. And yet, come morning, there was Humble, cozied up in the camera's blind spot. There was no way anyone could have put him there. I still couldn't move him though, and I was through talking to him. This time Sean did ask about the doll, but all I told him was, "It's my sister's, don't touch it." And he shrugged it off. I set up my phone to record Humble that night, but it automatically restarted for updates and Humble escaped back to my sister unseen. It's been going on like this for weeks now. Humble going back and forth between me and my sister. I've had Sean over every night, but I didn't tell him why though. Just that I was stressed with exams and the holidays and that I needed the dopamine boost, and that I wanted as much time together as possible before the Christmas break split us up. He didn't complain. I don't know what I thought he was protecting me from. Humble was just a doll, and he had never shown any signs that he meant me any harm. He was just a scout elf doing his job. It's funny that the phenomenon that was causing me so much terror was delighting my sister, and would have delighted me when I was younger. To Jenna, a toy moving on its own was all part of the holiday magic. To me, it was an omen that the world did not operate the way I thought it did, and forced me to question my very sanity. Yesterday, Friday the 20th, was the last day of classes. Humble was with my sister, and my boyfriend caught an overnight Greyhound to his family, so it was the first night in nearly 3 weeks that I was on my own. My plan was to drive back to my family on Saturday since I didn't want to drive that far in the dark. This would, of course, mean that I'd be left alone with Humble when he returned in the morning, which I coped with through my normally weekly ritual of excessive underage drinking. I woke up this morning like I do most Saturdays, with a mild to moderate hangover and only a vague recollection of the previous night. I reached over to try to nudge my boyfriend to get me some coffee, only to remember he wasn't there. I groaned and forced myself out of bed, stumbled out into the living area, and, just as I had expected, I'm greeted by Humble. Except that today, he's leaned up against the front door. I can't leave the apartment, not without moving him. I was trapped. I completely broke down then, dropping down to my knees and sobbing, demanding to know why he was tormenting me like this. I hadn't done anything other than grow up. That's when I realized, since I was crying and screaming at a doll, maybe I wasn't as grown up as I thought. I had thought that taking on 5 figures in student loans, getting shit-faced at least once a week, and settling for a practical boyfriend had all meant I was an adult. But I guess I was wrong. Humble was supposed to get his power from the love of the child who owned him, and that used to be me. I guess that by never overcoming my reluctance to move him, I never really broke that bond. And he was legitimately split between me and Jenna. That really was it then, wasn't it? All I had to do was shove him aside. I could even just ask someone to come over. When they came in, Humble would have just been pushed out of the way. But then that felt wrong somehow. As harrowing as this entire experience has been, there was still some part of me that was enchanted by the magic of it all. A part of me that most people lost a long time ago. And it was a part of me that I still wasn't ready to give up. And what about Jenna, my sweet little sister who loves her elf doll and still wanted to share him with me so that she knew I'd be safe on my own? I couldn't take away her experiencing actual Christmas magic, could I? I took another photo of Humble and texted it to Jenna, explaining that he had trapped me inside and I wouldn't be coming home until tomorrow. She understood completely. She would never dare to move Humble either. Of course, a few minutes later, I got a call from my mom and she was livid. She thought I was just too hungover to come home, ranting about how this was going to throw off the holiday plans and what an irresponsible drunk I was turning into. Considering that I'm presently coping with the whole incident by dipping into a bottle of cherry schnapps I got as an early Christmas gift, I can't say she's wrong. I'm still in my apartment right now. Humble hasn't moved. Of course, and I can't force myself to move him. I'm not mad at him. I don't think he's doing this to hurt me. I think he just honestly believes I'm still one of his kids. Today's been rough, but tomorrow will be better. He'll head back to my sister, I'm sure. Why wouldn't he? That's what he's been doing for the past 3 weeks. He'll be out of my way, and I'll be able to leave and head back home. My mom will have calmed down and just be happy to have me home, and everything will be perfect. Though she'll probably try to talk me into doing dry January with her. All that matters is that with me and my sister under the same roof, Humble will stay put until Christmas Eve, and then this nightmare before Christmas will all be over. At least, until next year. Maybe by then, I'll be a little more grown up. I am out of time. I have to tell all of you before it is too late. For weeks it has been following me everywhere, and now it is here, in this very room. I don't know where. It can be in the closet, under the bed, or under the table I am sitting at right now. Or perhaps it is in all of these places at once, closing in on me every second. Though I have never seen it, I know it is here, waiting, stalking, looming over me until I am in its grasp. I can no longer think straight. I haven't left my room for 6 days, ever since I heard it scratching at the door. I have stopped sleeping ever since that night with the dream, and now it is here with me. The moment I turn around to look if it is there, I will be face to face with it. I don't know why I know that, and yet I do. I just do. So please listen to my last message I can give to the world before I face it and embrace my eternal fate, because I need to warn you about it. This thing, this creature, this looming person. It began about a month ago while I was walking in the streets. I noticed that somebody was following me. I turned around and saw nobody in particular, just random people going on with their own lives. First, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe I was just tired or stressed, I thought. But that feeling only got worse as the days went on. Every time I left the house, I felt it. Stronger than the day before. Somebody was following me. That was the only thought I had every time I left the house. Yet I never saw anyone acting suspicious, as if that follower was invisible. But the feeling stopped every time I entered my home. It became clear for me that it was the only place I was safe from whatever was stalking me. 10 days after I first noticed that presence of the stalker, I stopped leaving my home. I felt forced to call in sick at my work as it became impossible for me to leave the building. The moment I laid my hand on the door handle, I felt as if I were to open the door, I would run straight into the person that was looming behind me for all of this time. Anxiety crept up on me and I stood at that door for what felt like hours, unable to move a finger. Then suddenly, a knock at the door. I was so startled I could not even scream. I just backed away when suddenly a second knock came from the door. Then another one, and another one. Each was louder than the last until it felt like someone was hammering at the door, trying to ram into it. I ran back up the stairs into my room on the 3rd floor where I hid. However, it knew. The knocking at the door stopped the moment I was on the 1st floor, and once I was in my room, I heard something. Scratching. At my window, it sounded like nails moving up and down the glass. How could that be? In the time I ran up the stairs, it managed to climb up the wall and found my window. But how? Doesn't anyone outside see this thing? I tried to call the police, but instead I heard an automated message telling me that the number I dialed does not exist. I was trapped. There was nobody I could talk to or message to ask for help, and even my roommate did not come home anymore. I was alone. Alone with that person looming over me. I did the best I could trying to survive. I tried to ignore the noises from outside as best as I could. I had lots of food stored in my kitchen. Some of it is my roommate's, but I can pay him once he returns. I have spent my days searching online for any clues on what that thing may be outside my house. I asked questions on different forums, but everyone either laughed it off as a joke or told me to go outside and face it. However, one reply appeared on every forum I posted on. A reply by a user simply named Person, which read, "You can only deny my presence for so long. Soon you will realize I am already inside." I thought it was just a troll comment, but how could he find all of my posts on various websites? 15 days after I locked myself away, I made a fatal mistake. I sent Person a PM with a simple question. Why me? That evening, after I was just done using the bathroom, I was walking by the door of my roommate's room when I saw movement. In the corner of my eye, a shadow behind the slightly ajar door disappearing. I slowly turned towards the door, sweating and on the verge of crying. I reached for the handle when the door slammed shut. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed everything edible in sight, and ran for my room. I kept my eyes shut in the hallway. I did not dare open them until I was inside my room. How? How did it get inside? Did it break a window? No, I would have heard that. I spent the rest of the day wondering how it happened. And why did it decide to invade suddenly? Was it because I asked Person about it? How could it know? Was it Person himself? And I still don't know why it is doing all of this. What have I done to deserve this? I did not dare to look at the door where I heard continuous scratching for the entire day. The next day, I returned to my computer where I saw that Person had answered me. I did not dare to open the message. It seems the more I acknowledge its presence, the closer it gets. That much is certain. But now I am trapped inside my room. The food I scavenged from the kitchen might last about a week if I ration it carefully. It was less than I grabbed, but on the way back I was shaking so much that I must have dropped at least half of what I was carrying. What can I do? I'm scared. What will it do if I face it? Will it kill me, or will it do something worse? Besides my fear, another feeling crept up inside me. Curiosity. I suddenly became very curious on what it is and what it does. But even more than that, I needed to know why. Stupid. I was so stupid to let my curiosity get the better of me. I opened the message of person. Be honored. You have been chosen. Stop fighting and embrace your fate. That night I had a dream. It was dark. Darker than just darkness. This was not the absence of light. This was the overwhelming presence of darkness. My eyes were wide open. I watched the darkness, unable to close my eyes for even a blink. I lay there unable to move. There was no escape. I was trapped. Trapped on my bed, all I could do was face forward to see where it stood. There it was, right in front of me. Behind the darkness, it stood before me. Even though I could not see, I saw it there in the darkness standing at the end of my bed. A terrible human-shaped figure whose head reached up to the ceiling. It had no face, yet countless eyes stared at me. In front of me, above me, on my left, my right, and even below me. It saw me from every direction. I could do nothing but look. I wanted to scream, but I didn't feel my mouth. I wanted to run, but I didn't feel my legs. All I could do was face it as it faced me, and so I waited for it to finish it. But it never did. I did not move. It just stood there, looming over me, stabbing me with its stares like needles. No escape. Nowhere I will be safe from it. No matter where I am, it will always be there. This looming person will never let me escape. These thoughts circled in my head the entire time I lay there. I finally woke up, covered in sweat. I thought it was just a dream and I was finally safe. I was wrong. After the drowsiness wore off, I noticed it. It was inside my room. I was not able to see it, but I noticed this feeling again. The feeling of its eyes looking at me, like rusty needles piercing my skin. No matter where I turned, it was right there, just disappearing out of my sight. Up, down, left, right, it didn't matter where I turned. It always disappeared before I could see it. However, every time it disappeared, it felt closer. Every time I looked for it, it felt like it was one step closer to me than the last time. At that moment, I knew that I could no longer run. I decided to throw caution into the wind and contact a person again. I asked him every question I could think of. What is it? Is it you? What does it want? His answers were not helpful. Just the same as before. You know that you cannot run, so why are you still resisting? These answers didn't scare me anymore. I was certain that once I asked the right question, I would get the right answer. I spent the last days asking him everything. I did not sleep. I did not eat. I barely even blink anymore. The moment I get careless, it will take me. But I can't let it. I'm scared. Before I started writing, I asked Person my last question. Will it hurt? And his answer was, the more you fight it, the more it hurts. You should have given up while you had the chance. It will hurt. It will hurt terribly. At this point, I was just ready to accept death. But it won't let me. For so long, it has been tormenting me. Just killing me like that won't be enough for it. I know that. If I am fast enough, I should be able to escape it one last time. I hope it works. But I also wish that nobody else will have to face this monstrosity. Please just go away. I do not wish this fate on anyone. Now it's time for me to go. I will not be able to fight this for another minute. I will close my eyes and rush to the window. This is my only chance to escape its clutches. Just send this and then to the window. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. The first story is called I Found a Letter from My Stalker, created by MinisterofOwls. The second is called The Elf on the Shelf by TheVespersBell. And the third is The Looming Person by Alender. Please let me know what your favorite story was in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn post notifications on so you won't miss the next video.